Thank you very much. That was the CFC packaging. And as she said, I had a delusion then that we individuals could make a difference, and I still actually proceed on that basis. I'm going to cut through the data as quickly as I possibly can, because we've had quite a lot of slides and quite a lot of numbers. But just to give an overview of some data that I worked out in my book, which is food availability in each country in the world, given as a percentage of food requirements in that country. So a hypothetical country with 100% of its requirements provided for in its shops and restaurants would fall at about 100%. Now, as you can see, most countries, as soon as they get richer, start pushing up for surpluses. And most agronomists agree that if you've got 130% of your requirements in your shops and restaurants, you have a relatively secure food supply. But as countries get richer and richer, what they go for is more and more surplus. And the gap between each country's dot and the line at 130% I call unnecessary surplus. Now, we've been talking about ways in which health, sustainability, and the environment can intersect. This data is useful if you want to look at all of those things together, because obviously having more food available to a population than you need has an impact on the environment. It obviously relates to overconsumption and sustainability of both health and the environment. So it's useful data, and I would say that whether you're looking at policies to curb advertising of sweets to children or looking at policies that reduce food waste, both can be measured and leveraged through this data. And it's a good idea if we can improve it. I do want to highlight one of the misleading kind of things that you might have picked up from that, which is that there is a leveling off of food surpluses as countries get richer. If you include the indirect access to edible food through the meat and dairy consumption in any individual country, so all of that wheat and soy and maize that we could eat but which we choose to feed to our livestock, if you include the access to those calories as well, rich countries have between 3 and 4 times the food that they need. All Western European, North American countries have that direct or indirect access to that amount of food. And I want us to bear that in mind when we talk about the need to increase production to feed the world's hungry people. We do already produce enough food for 9 billion, probably even 12 billion people. The problem is that an awful lot of it is wasted, and there are not mechanisms to ensure that people who need that food get it. So, rather than dwell on that forever, I'm going to talk about some of the specific examples of egregious food waste and what we can and have done about bringing it down. This package of beans may look fairly innocuous to you, but I want to draw your attention to the word trimmed. Now, anyone who has grown beans of this type in their garden know that they come in various different lengths and shapes and sizes. However, if you have a plastic box that they have to go in, you've got a problem. And as you can see, these beans have been trimmed not where they taper off because you've got to the end of the bean, but where they're still at their widest berth. Now, what does that mean? It means that the farmers in Kenya who are growing these beans have to slice them off halfway along, and when we went to Kenya with the United Nations Environment Programme last year, spoke to farmers who are wasting literally 30 to 40% of the food that they're growing on the land, using the water in a country where both of those resources are highly limited, and where there are millions of hungry people. 30 to 40% of the food that they're growing is going to waste. They're trimming off those beans, and none of it is being used. The second cause of food waste, other than those cosmetic standards that are laid down by the supermarkets that we go to every day in Europe and buy that produce, is the cancellation of forecasts. So supermarkets will give a producer a certain forecast of demand, but very often at the last minute, sometimes even after the stuff has been harvested, flown all the way to Europe, it's cancelled. Now, the cost of that waste lies with the supplier, and obviously that means that the company doesn't have an incentive to reduce that food waste. And this depot alone was throwing away more than 20 tons of good quality food every single day. And the waste contractors who came to collect that food had to sign a contract saying that they would make sure that none of it went for human consumers. Now, that is a crime. It is a crime that we, in the West, are paying for at the moment. But I believe that we have an opportunity and we must tackle it. I'm going to talk about a couple more examples. This is the waste of bananas from one banana plantation after one day of harvest in Ecuador. bananas being wasted in Costa Rica. These are all for very similar reasons. These carrots are too long to fit into the supermarket's packaging, and they're all being wasted. Now, my organisation, this is parsnips being wasted in the United Kingdom. My organisation decided to tackle this in 4 different ways. Firstly, to go to the public, to instigate a mass mobilisation campaign against food waste globally. And one of the ways in which we do that is to launch Feeding the 5,000 campaigns in every country we go to. We launched this with an event, an alliance of partners working together to look at the priorities of food waste in those countries. And we feed at these events 5,000 people, all from the kind of ugly fruit and vegetables that would otherwise be wasted. And what we found in the United Kingdom, by raising awareness through these win-win solutions, saying, look, we shouldn't be wasting that food, we should be getting it to market, we found that people have really got behind this idea. And off the back of that, we've launched something called the Gleaning Network, where we go to those fields, harvest the stuff that's being left there because it's not cosmetically perfect, and get that to hungry people. But we're also raising awareness. And what we found in the United Kingdom is that, this is going to sound funny, but since the launch of our campaign, the sale of ugly fruit and vegetables is the fastest growing sector of the fresh produce market in the United Kingdom. In 2012, you're using up my valuable seconds. In 2012, we sold 300,000 tons of UK ugly produce that would have normally been wasted. So that is clearly good for farmers, it's clearly good for the environment, and it's making a big difference. We visited with supermarket buyers, the producers who were complaining about this waste, and we picked those waste carrots out of their waste bins and said, look, guys, come on. We can come up with ways of getting this to market, whether it's by changing the cosmetic standards or investing in the kind of infrastructure to make sliced carrots or get it into carrot soup, or for one way or another, get these carrots into people's bellies and rather than putting them into bins. And so we engage businesses, we engage the public. The third thing we do is engage government, because whilst I think that we can do an awful lot without government, there are some areas where they need to step in. In the United Kingdom, we successfully lobbied after many years for something called the Groceries Code Adjudicator Act. And any supermarket who thinks at the moment their supply chain is immune from the kind of action that the Groceries Code Adjudicator is now implementing in the United Kingdom, I warn that in the European Union there is now an interest in replicating this law across Europe. What does it do? It gives the power of the adjudicator, her name is Christine Tacon, the power to fine supermarkets up to 1% of their turnover. In the case of our biggest supermarket, that's £500 million, and at a profit margin of 2 to 3%, that's obviously a relatively big signal to supermarkets. And what it does is it says, if you as a supermarket cause food waste on the part of your supplier by changing your order at the last minute, you must share the cost. And a failure to do so, and they are failing to do it in Kenya, which is why we're going back, will result ultimately in an investigation and a fine. The fourth area is looking in places, particularly like in Kenya, where there are opportunities to invest in post-harvest infrastructure, whether it's storage, but also in processing, to get that food which is currently being wasted both to local markets and to export markets. So, for example, I visited solar dryers where they're drying mangoes that can't be sold. But we could make tinned beans or stripped down beans or sliced beans for export, for local consumption, and that will help to increase on-farm income, decrease food waste, and increase food availability where it's needed most without any adverse impact on the environment. I cannot think of a more win-win solution: sustainability, environment, and health. Thank you very much indeed.